Next, what is behind this strange obsession with Phillip Schofield? Asked Douglas Murray in this week's magazine. Is it a distraction from the bigger problems facing Britain? He's with me now to discuss. So Douglas, in this week's magazine, you write about Phillip Schofield. What inspired you to choose this topic for your column?
Well, obviously, it's an incredibly inspirational subject. No, I mean, really, it was just the fact that I have been astonished, amazed that the last 10 days of news in Britain has been so almost completely blackout, wall-to-wall Phillip Schofield. I said recently in my column, I didn't think that the British media could get more absurd than their obsession with the speeding awareness course that the Home Secretary may have to go on. And to the extent that British journalists from the BBC and ITV and Sky were flown out to the G7 in Tokyo, where they used the opportunity of being in Japan to ask Rishi Sunak about Suella Braverman's speeding awareness course. And I said there, I mean, what gives here, this obsession of the British media with these minutiae stories, you know. I've written about this in the magazine before in the political field. We had the weeks and weeks of controversy over Dominic Raab and the manner in which he threw a cherry tomato into a bin, a throw that resounded across Whitehall apparently and terrified the civil service, who then said they were bullied. And then you get all the sort of normal sort of Whitehall covering journalists obsessed with this. How can we get rid of the Deputy Prime Minister? Then they move on to the Home Secretary. And now it seems, as I always say, there's always another circle to the inferno. It seems that the pack has moved on to the This Morning couch. And as I say in my column, I hope it's no insult to Holly Willoughby and Phillip Schofield to say this, but less than 1% of the population tuned into This Morning. So what's the explanation for wall-to-wall coverage about these two really very uninteresting people?
I mean, well, Douglas, some might say you're a bit of a snob, though, if you're not interested in breakfast television. I mean, what's wrong with people being allowed to sort of discuss the ins and outs and these sort of people, they live in the public spotlight? What's wrong with us discussing their fall from grace?
Yeah, no, I mean, then some people may say I'm a bit of a snob for this, but there we are. I really don't mind the accusation leveled at me if it's to do with not wanting to be completely obsessed with morning television that really people aren't interested in anyway, as I say, because you can tell from the viewing figures. Anyway, no, it is really just that it is what I describe as, I think, a sort of an odd activity, a displacement activity going on in modern Britain that is reflected in other countries as well, but I think is nowhere as parochial as it is in the UK. A weird displacement activity with getting on with other things like, tearing up the ITV morning scheduling offices. What are we really doing when we're doing this? What is really happening when we get these national obsessions of who knew what, when? What is it that we're doing? And my explanation, as I say in the column, is we're just distracting ourselves because all the really big issues in our country, we completely fail to deal with. I mean, I just watched, it's not the biggest issue in the country, but I just watched another Labour politician fail to say that women, by and large, don't have penises. They get themselves into these Middle Ages-like contortions on these questions of heresy and dogma. And but if you get them onto anything important, ask anyone in the cabinet or shadow cabinet about energy policy, about housing policy, about immigration policy, about fiscal policy, about borrowing, debt, unfunded pensions, liabilities, inflation, you name it. What do they have to say? What do any of them have to say? I mean, Labour always tells us that they want to debate. No, they don't, because they don't have anything to say. No, none of them have anything to say about the big issues going on. And as I say, I think that there is a weird displacement activity in modern Britain, which is, let's play this game of toppling person after person, politician after politician, and eventually toppling everyone off the morning sofas. And then we think we've achieved something. We haven't.
I'm sure we know I'm sure you're interested to know, Douglas, that MPs already said on the Culture Committee that they're going to call in ITV's bosses next week to discuss the issue in Parliament. So not sure what you'd make of that as displacement activity.
As I say, circle after circle, I tell you.
I mean, but you write in the column that it's a sort of singularly British obsession. You spend a lot of time in America and travelling elsewhere around the world. Why do you think this is such a British thing, sort of focusing on the trivial rather than the fundamental?
Well, it's also there's this question of what are we doing, right? What is Britain doing in this era? We tried to leap out of the EU in 2016 and have had years of contortions since. The attempt to sort of reverse decline keeps running into a block or a wall. Liz Truss said she wanted to reverse decline and lasted about a fortnight. So sort of decline seems back on the agenda. If you ask a politician in America what they want to do, on the left, they'll say they want social justice and so on. And on the right, they'll say they want to build the economy. Well, I mean, I happen to think that the latter is more plausible and a better answer, rising tide and all of that. But they do sort of, they have a plan, which is the American economy should be going gangbusters. What is the plan in Britain, exactly? I mean, do any of them know? Can Keir Starmer give a plausible explanation of what the country would do under his leadership? Can Rishi Sunak to that when it comes to that? Can he actually say what his vision of Britain is? I think the answer is no. And that there's something very revealing in that. And into that void steps all of this trivia and what I regard as being fundamentally distracting activities.
Well, quite. And I wonder, perhaps, do you think that this shows that Britain is just simply not a serious country now?
Well, I think we haven't been for some time. But I think that we really need to get out of this rut of thinking that if the media moves the latest non-scandal scandal along a little bit and gets another scalp, then we get anywhere. We don't. Doesn't improve education for anyone. Doesn't improve housing opportunities for anyone. Doesn't improve the job market. Doesn't do anything really. And so yes, it is a strange British obsession, and I'm all for trivia in certain quantities, but the trivia cannot outweigh the serious stuff. And as I say, I mean, it's just a very bad sign for a country that you end up being so willing to be distracted from distraction by distraction.
And you write in the column, Douglas, that you think it's about sort of misdirected anger, misdirected emotion, that all this sort of stuff is channeled into these quite trivial matters. I mean, do you think that, as you say, partly because we're wanting to be distracted, that we are sort of missing bigger, genuine scandals in this country? I know you've written before in the magazine about what went on during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I mean, do you think that sort of similar scandals are being missed because we're simply focusing on completely the wrong issues?
Well, I think that's undoubtedly the case. And as I say, several recent columns, I've tried to draw people's attention to this. As I've said fairly often recently, what would we be doing if we weren't doing this? What would the media be doing? What would government be doing? If government didn't keep on getting clogged up by these sorts of, cake gate, speed gate, everything's a damn gate, and everyone thinks it's so original when they put gate after anything. What would the government be concentrating on? What might it be achieving? If the answer is not much more, then there's even more trouble that we're in than I thought. But my belief is that we just are horribly misdirecting our energies. And yes, there's doubtless scandals going on. There always are. And there are scandals that are of significance. I mean, you just mentioned Northern Ireland. The steak knife controversies come back up again. I don't think that outside of Northern Ireland, 1 in 1,000 households know anything about that. Maybe they don't need to. But it would probably be a more intelligent scandal to look at than the Gordon the Gopher's former sofa mate scandal. I think that, but as I say, the main thing isn't where are the scandals? That it's a very post-Watergate thing that journalists think that their job is to find all the scandals that exist, expose them, and then win all of the awards. It's a very sort of post-Watergate way of doing journalism. Sometimes there are scandals, then they should be exposed. But the whole of politics, the whole of the country, isn't just a set of scandals waiting to be uncovered. But there is some fundamental failure of the media in this. But the fundamental failure of the media is a fundamental failure of government. It's a reflection of that, which is the fact that government seems not to be able to do in Britain any of the things that we need it to do, have asked it to do, and want it to do. Government can't seem to do that. It waits for court judgments on things before moving ahead with anything, because it seems that the government isn't in charge. Strasbourg still is, and on certain matters, obviously on immigration and so on. They wait for decisions to be made elsewhere to allow them to make a decision. So yes, then the press reflects that by also engaging in sort of pastime trivia. I think it's very, very sad, because there are huge issues we could be addressing. At the end of my column this week, I mentioned some of the sort of cosmic issues we could be addressing. But we're nowhere near that. And I wish that it was just possible to, obviously it's what I'm trying to do, to encourage my fellow countrymen to just raise their eyes slightly off the level of the morning television sofa and onto the things that could really matter and improve things and help our country. Because otherwise, this is just going to be a perennial game of distraction, and it's one that I find exhausting. I suspect that most of the people engaged find exhausting, and is tiring us out and wasting our energies, which need to be expended elsewhere.
Well, talking of your tired energies, for my final question, Douglas, there's now a vacancy on this morning's sofa. Will you be throwing your hat in the ring?
No, it sounds like a proper viper's nest, and I don't mind getting up early, but I don't love it. No, I think I'm not in the running, which obviously saddens me deeply, James. But on the other hand, leaves the field open for you.
I think I've got my place here at the Spectator with you, Douglas. Thank you for joining us.
Great pleasure.